The idea of admitting we aren't fine is one of the scariest things to imagine. In a culture perpetuated by the bootstraps mentality, we can't afford not to keep moving, hustling, achieving. But at what cost? And are we really okay continuing with this performance when in reality no one is truly fine? I'm not, and you shouldn't be either. So let's change the story and be okay not just getting over it. Hello, listeners, and welcome to another solo episode of the Untethering Shame podcast. I'm your host, Kira Wackett, and today we're talking about why we don't need to just get over it. That's never worked or been helpful. Instead, we need to feel, heal, and move through things so that we can live beyond them. We're constantly forcing ourselves to get over it. We fear conflict and challenging conversations to the point we bury our feelings inside until we either explode or become so detached and resentful we no longer engage meaningfully in our relationships. Why do we do it? The short answer, it's easier. In the moment anyways. Why would you talk to your partner about how dismissed and hurt you felt when you can just pretend it's fine and get over it? Why would you tell your friend they hurt your feelings the last time you were together and it's still sitting with you? Gosh, it's so much better to exert the endless energy to shove it down below, isn't it? Why would you tell your boss that you're feeling unappreciated and underpaid when you can just keep making crap money doing 10 times your job description? At least you have a job, right? So you should be grateful. We constantly sacrifice our wants and needs to ease tension. We equate conflict with unhealthy relationships or with being dramatic or selfish. We've developed a deeply entrenched system of beliefs that tells us our job is to cause as few waves as possible and to just keep taking it and holding a smile on our faces the entire time. You don't want to be seen as dramatic, do you? Wouldn't you rather have shitty relationships than none at all? You should be grateful for what you have, right? This list of ridiculous beliefs is endless and unfortunately traps so many of us in a lifetime of repression and stagnancy. Now, the trick isn't to beat yourself up for doing what's been ingrained and feels natural or better for you, especially in a culture that touts the pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality. Instead, let's take the opportunity to start doing something about it. Resolution, honesty, and forgiveness are the anecdotes and are some of the more complex concepts in the human experience. Because again, the resistance I mentioned before really comes into play. And also because some truly incorrect and crappy definitions about these concepts have been put out there. So let me start by defining these concepts as I've come to understand and integrate them into my life and work. Resolution is the experience in which all parties feel they've been heard. They may not have gotten what they wanted. Disappointment may be and usually is present, but everything is on the table and the outcome has factored all of this in. Honesty is sharing your whole truth and when necessary, naming your feelings and making your needs known. It requires the co-creation of a shared space of vulnerability and involves being honest with what you can and can't take on or handle in a given situation or moment. And forgiveness is about untethering yourself from the pain of your past, taking what you need and leaving the rest. It's about grieving what's been done to or by you, acknowledging your feelings and seeing that your story is about more than this experience, relationship, or incident. Okay, so now that we have this shared understanding of these terms, I want to talk a little bit about what we can do. So first, I want you to reflect on what thoughts and feelings do you feel less comfortable sharing and why? Again, go back to this idea of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, be fine, don't have any emotional needs. What are those areas that you feel most inclined to avoid or to stuff down? And where did that fear or discomfort come from? What's happened when you shared these in the past or let yourself experience them? And what's stopping you now? What lingering resentments are you holding on to? And I want you to dig deep here and scan throughout your body. Remember, we hide our emotions well, but they're still there. So even though you don't want to see them, if you give yourself the opportunity to just mind for those with intention, they will show up. Now, I want you to think about what's held you up in letting these go. What have you told yourself you need to do to be able to do that? Or what feels needed in this context? And what would it mean if you couldn't get that? So I want you to think about this here and this idea of whatever resentments, whatever pieces are in you, you have this idea that if I hold on to this resentment, I have some sense of power. I have some sense of remembrance. I'm anchoring on what's happened so I don't fall into that before. I can be fine as long as I remember not to do or be this thing. And it might be resentment towards someone else. It might be resentment towards yourself for how something played out. And in your mind, holding on to them is helpful. But again, I want you to think about what would happen if you let them go. And if you don't get all the things that you want, let's say you screw up again, or you let this go and someone treats you like garbage again, what would it be like to be okay with that and to trust in your resilience to be able to move through it? Now, I want you to think about how you've thought personally about forgiveness. Look, it might be a concept that we need to explore. And as you look at your resentments again, I want you to remind yourself that forgiveness is not justice. And where the problem lies is that repression and resentment, or when it's ourselves, inevitably shame, is there. It leaves us feeling like justice can never be served. We need to let that go. It's never going to feel like enough. Justice is not really a thing that we can feel when we're emotionally attached to an experience or situation. So instead, we need to think about how do we let those resentments go and forgive ourselves or someone else? Because what we know is that holding on to them is not only not serving us, but ultimately hurting us in the long run. Now, I want you to think about with whom can you be more honest? What would it look like? What if you weren't fine all the time? And what if at least when one person asks you how you're doing, you allowed them to see the full experience in your life? And consider what's going to hold you back from that, so that you can think about what the next step might be to work through that. And in terms of resolution and how it might relate to forgiveness, can you identify one area, event, or person that you're holding on to these feelings for? Again, this could be yourself, and reflect on the situation. What can be done about it? And again, are there ways and places that we can acknowledge our feelings, even if the way things ended or the way things are ending doesn't look like what we wanted? Can we acknowledge that our feelings have been honored or our needs have been communicated, and then be able to let go and to find that sense of peace in where we're moving forward? Now it's your turn. So I want you to think about how your life would be different if you came to really practice from these three places. If you recognize that you don't have to be fine all the time, that you can have anger, sadness, resentment, you can have pain, and you can allow it to be seen. And that as you're doing that, as you're honoring and being honest with yourself about what you're feeling, about what you need, can you create that space for forgiveness for yourself, for other people, for your past, for your future? And then find that sense of resolution or peace in how things are moving forward. Because again, we're not fine. And we can find and make peace in our lives so that moving forward, we can feel more whole in the process. Now, before you go, I would love to hear from you about anything or everything that came up just in this small moment together. So be sure to check out the Q&A, fill out the poll, or send me a voice memo so that we can connect and I can continue to learn how I can best support you in your work to becoming more shame resilient. If you found today's episode valuable and insightful, please hit that review button, leave that 5-star, let me know what you're thinking, and of course, share this episode with someone you think could benefit from hearing it. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And remember, change takes time, but every step counts. So stay the course, stay hopeful, and stay committed to your well-being. We'll be back with more insightful discussions to support you on your journey. Until then, take care, and we'll catch you next week.